This is Faith Under Fire. We take you straight to the voices on the front lines of religious battlegrounds. I'm news anchor Sarah Harnish, and with me today, Alliance Defending Freedom attorney Gabby McIntyre. We're talking Planned Parenthood. Does Medicaid money need to be used to fund abortions with Planned Parenthood? This is a huge case that could change the trajectory of funding for the largest abortion provider in the United States. What is at stake in Medina versus Planned Parenthood South Atlantic? Tell me more.
We know one very important thing. Americans don't want their tax dollars propping up the abortion industry. And this case really highlights the American people should not be forced to fund activist organizations like Planned Parenthood that perform abortions and distribute these dangerous gender transition drugs to minors. So what happened is a South Carolina statute prohibits the use of these taxpayer funds to pay for abortions. And because of this, South Carolina deemed abortion facilities, including Planned Parenthood, unqualified to receive Medicaid funding if they continue performing abortions. And this change redirects those Medicaid funds from abortion facilities to comprehensive, real high-quality healthcare clinics that provide these family planning services to women in the state. Planned Parenthood also doesn't need American taxpayer dollars, and Americans certainly don't need Planned Parenthood.
And this case has been around for a while. So a little background, South Carolina determined that Planned Parenthood was not qualified to receive taxpayer funding under the Medicaid program. A federal district court restored that money. Then it went to a higher court, the U.S. Appeals Court. They also ruled in favor of Planned Parenthood. So it's been a few years of litigation, but it just hit the highest court in February, and the U.S. Supreme Court justices said they will take up the case. Should states be forced to direct federal cash to pay for abortions at Planned Parenthood? And I like that there's 18 states involved in this. So what do you think?
When Congress created this Medicaid program, it gave the states the ability to steward those resources. South Carolina recognizes that money is fungible. So any money that you give to an abortion facility like Planned Parenthood, even for other services, is going to free them up to use that money to then do, in their case, abortion politicking and performing even more abortions. States like South Carolina recognize that, and that's the reason why they want to direct their funds to real comprehensive care and exclude organizations like Planned Parenthood, which are riddled with scandal, and any organization with such a dismal track record like Planned Parenthood should be excluded from the state's public funding.
According to Pew Research, 73% of Christians think that abortion should be illegal in most cases because even small humans deserve human rights. 86% of religiously unaffiliated Americans, though, say women have a right to choose. The number's up since the overturning of Roe versus Wade. You guys are fighting against the money used to pay for many of these abortions, some 392,000 nationwide every year. As many as 2 in 3 abortions in the U.S., Planned Parenthood is responsible for. With most Americans wanting access, those that do not have a faith-based view, do you think that cutting off access to funding is a strong case in court?
Well, we know that Americans actually don't want their tax dollars propping up the abortion industry. Most Americans actually reject taxpayer funding of abortion. And like I mentioned, money is fungible. So increasing funding for non-abortion services is going to free up that funding for Planned Parenthood to do more abortions and more pro-abortion politicking. But the other thing, too, is Americans oppose giving children these dangerous gender transition drugs. And Planned Parenthood now touts that it's become the nation's second largest provider of these drugs. And they even admit to giving them to minors across the country, and particularly in South Carolina.
That's something we never talk about, is that they're also taking the taxpayer money to lobby so that they can get more money. And so it's a big, huge, vicious cycle. One thing that Donald Trump has brought up many times is that he wants states to make these decisions. Is that part of your case? I mean, the money that's being handed to this group, Medicaid, is federal money. So should that be a state decision?
States should be able to, and under the Medicaid program, are able to shepherd their resources in a way that they see fit for their taxpayers. And South Carolina has a law that prohibits the use of these taxpayer funds to pay for abortions. And because of this, the South Carolina governor, Henry McMaster, he ordered the state's Department of Health and Human Services to deem those abortion facilities, including Planned Parenthood, unqualified.
What happens next in court?
Well, hopefully we hope and pray that the justices will hear the case and rule fairly in our favor, that the state of South Carolina is not required to fund political organizations like Planned Parenthood, whether states like South Carolina can redirect their funding away from abortion facilities and use that money for real quality comprehensive care in their states.
It's a huge discussion, and it could dramatically impact the number of babies killed by abortion every year, because if they have no cash, there is no procedure to be able to have those abortions done. Why does Alliance Defending Freedom pick up cases like this?
Because life is a human right, and organizations like Planned Parenthood that have these dismal track records of how they mismanage their funds, also the scandals that they've been a part of. This is bigger than just what the taxpayer funding is being used for. This is about states' autonomy to regulate what those taxpayer funds are being used for, and following really the dictates of the people who do not want their taxpayer dollars to support abortions.
Do you think that we've got a good chance on a case like this? There definitely seems like there's been a little bit of a shift since Roe versus Wade. I felt like we had a lot of momentum and a big wave going, and then you got the cases like Tish James, going after all of the pregnancy resource centers in New York. It just seems like people felt like their rights were taken away when they were actually just handed back to the states. So do you think in this kind of an environment that this case can do well in front of the Supreme Court?
I think absolutely. I think it's very clear that when Congress created this Medicaid program, that the states have this right and this authority to steward these resources. And especially on this procedural issue, I think it's very clear the other side's arguments are just simply not persuasive. Under the Medicaid Act, the states have the authority to take that funding and use it to prop up real, comprehensive, high-quality care, especially for indigent and low-income women in their states.
What happens if the case is lost?
This case could have huge implications. It's bigger than just Planned Parenthood. South Carolina winning would actually mean that other states won't be forced to waste time and money on this endless litigation that would be better spent helping people in their states. But if it goes the other way, Planned Parenthood's lawsuit would take the state's authority over Medicaid and essentially give it to federal judges, so taking that state's autonomy away. But we're very confident that the court is going to see that this authority does belong to the states and that the American people should not be forced to fund activist organizations like Planned Parenthood.
Find out more at adflegal.org.